How many times has Tennessee been in a 1 versus 2 matchup according to the AP top 25 poll? Now is taken over by the college football playoff, but that would be when? Only once, January the 4th, 1999. So this is the AP poll. We're going to get to some college football playoff numbers as well. But for historical perspective, when you look at a 1 versus 2 matchup, that's only happened once, and that's been Tennessee and Florida State, which that was, of course, the national championship game. Tennessee also a number 1 versus number 2 regular season game since 2000. It has not happened often at all. You can go back to Ohio State, Texas in 2006, Ohio State, Michigan in 2006, LSU, Alabama 2011, LSU, Alabama 2019, Tennessee at Georgia 2022. So, as far as a regular season, it has just happened 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times since 2000. That's just unbelievable to me. And an 8-0 start. And I'll go to the historian Caleb Calhoun on this. Josh Heupel, 2022. He has done it. An 8-0 start. That has only happened 7 times. 7 times in the history of the program. Josh Heupel, 2022. Philip Fulmer, 1998. An 8-0 start, of course. They went on to win the national title. 1956, Bowden Wyatt. And then, some guy that was a general and had one of the most awesome lives that you can possibly imagine because he fought for our country and was one of the best football coaches, I believe, underrated when you look back over history. General Neyland did it 4 times, went 8-0. Caleb, you're the history buff. Pretty heavy numbers.
Yeah, very impressive numbers. I wrote a few weeks ago, Tennessee, since joining the SEC in 1933, has never failed to win the SEC title after a 6-0 start. Funny enough, and now they're up to 8-0. Another tidbit we should throw in there is the highest combined regular season matchup Tennessee's ever played in. Before this one was that 1956 year. Tennessee was number 3. Georgia Tech was number 2. Tennessee was visiting Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech was in the SEC at the time. Tennessee had a Heisman candidate then, too, a guy by the name of Johnny Majors. And they beat Georgia Tech at Georgia Tech 6-0. That clinched them the SEC championship. They finished the year 10-0, and Johnny Majors got robbed of the Heisman. Some people think Tennessee got robbed of the national title, too. They gave it to Oklahoma, but Oklahoma was in the midst of like a 47-game winning streak, so I understand why the pollsters gave it to Oklahoma that year. But a lot of similarities to that Georgia Tech game and this Georgia game. Tennessee's the underdog. They're visiting a team in Georgia. It's an SEC matchup, top 5 matchup, Heisman candidate for Tennessee. Tennessee had a second-year head coach. The 1956 game, Tennessee, both head coaches played at Tennessee because Bowden Wyatt was at Tennessee and Bobby Dodd was at Georgia Tech.
Good stuff. And I didn't know this. I don't know if you saw this on the Twitter. I sent this out yesterday. I saw a plaque that had this is the home of the origination or the meeting of the SEC, and that was in downtown Knoxville. You're the historian. Did you know that?
Yep.
I didn't know that. So it was the Southern Conference at the time, and then right next to Clancy's Tavern and Ale House, Whiskey Ale House. It's a good place to eat, good Irish food. But then right next door is now a hotel, and so that's, you probably know more history about it than I do, Caleb. That's where the SEC was first introduced to the world, first organized, however you want to phrase it. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, the Southern Conference was way too big at the time. We're talking, I think 30 teams are in the Southern Conference. And like, how do you crown a champion when at the time you're playing 6 conference games and you got 30 teams in the conference? So they agreed on the split. They decided the schools west and south of the Appalachian Mountains in the Southern Conference would join the SEC. And there's 10 original members: Tennessee, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Auburn, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, and LSU. Also in there were Georgia Tech, Tulane, and another school by the name of Sewanee.
Yep. Sewanee was in there. And then I don't know the history of how Tech wasn't in the SEC. We'll dive into that at some point because at some point they went ACC and that was a bad decision.
They didn't like the there were scholarship limits that they didn't agree with that the SEC had. They thought the SEC should impose scholarship limits, and so they didn't like that, so they bailed.
I gotcha. Well, interesting. Okay, so Tennessee is a draw, way beyond those that wear orange, way beyond those that know every single word to Rocky Top. These are some interesting numbers that we pulled thanks to Tennessee Sports Information Department. 28.7 million combined total viewers versus Power 5 opponents, 11.6 million. The most watched college football game this season, that was against Alabama. 4 million, the third most watched game on cable. And if you look at some of the ESPN PR numbers, this is from just last week. So Michigan State, you would think would beat Tennessee, Kentucky, which has never really been much of a rivalry, even though Kentucky thinks it is. And it did, 5.6 million, but you're at least in the ballpark with 4 million for a Kentucky Tennessee game. And those used to be such snooze fest in November. And Amanda, I don't think any Tennessee game is a snooze fest now because how exciting their offense is. And we talk about how important Saturday is, but what has already been achieved is Tennessee is a real national brand again. And that's only going to benefit them in recruiting. I mean, people that don't really care about Tennessee or don't care about the Tennessee Alabama game, a lot of people saw that because it just went viral, went public, whatever term you want to use. It's Tennessee has gone from just a maybe they'll do something one day to a national brand, no matter what happens on Saturday.
No, but getting back to Saturday, I think Tennessee fans are going to be very, very pleased with what the outcome of the game. As long as Georgia doesn't come out swinging from somewhere that they haven't come out before last season. I mean, that is the last time I've seen a Georgia win. That was very, very, very impressive. The thing about the Oregon win against Georgia was, or the Oregon win this season at Georgia was, they had a year to prepare. And I think people give them a lot of credit for that win. And I get it. They did well, but that was just out coaching. That was all that it was. And you're not going to get out coached here. Like Heupel's not going to get out coached by Smart. That's just not going to happen.
Jimmy says today is my birthday. Happy birthday to you. Jimmy says tomorrow is my present. We'll see. A couple of other thoughts. Hey, it would be interesting to hear your thoughts. Who has the better defense, Alabama or Georgia? Outside of the Tennessee game, Alabama is better based off stats. So I do want to dig into that because I think that's an apt comparison. Good morning to you as well, Rolly SZN. History will be made. We shall see. A couple of other numbers that I wanted to throw at you is 3:30 CBS tomorrow is when it all goes down. And Caleb, I'm curious. You're not in East Tennessee. You work remotely. And so you see this from a different perspective. But Tennessee, as far as a national brand, how much do you think things have changed in just the past month, and what Tennessee has been able to do? How are they viewed differently, do you think? And for those that don't know, Caleb lives in the Baltimore area. I'm curious the coverage from a completely outside the region perspective, how different Tennessee is viewed maybe as opposed to August the 30th.
So I'm a little more unique because just I stand out covering college football in general up here. There's just a level of apathy that's, I mean, Maryland right now is 6-2 and nobody's really talking about it. But if you're in the college football realm, I will say on a national scale, there's still a lot of talk about Tennessee. I think there's been a desire for a long time now from national media for Tennessee to be good because of what you just talked about. People like to see Tennessee be good. It's good for the sport. And so I think that I actually would say that this is something that nobody saw coming, but it's something that people have embraced in a lot of ways because Tennessee's just a fun team to watch, but also just from a national perspective, I think college football's better when Tennessee's good. And I know Wes Rucker got some heat for that when he tweeted that a month ago. It's true. Like, you want Tennessee to be good. You want the Celtics and the Lakers to be good in the NBA. Like, you just do. And you want Tennessee to be good in football. And you want the Cowboys to make a run in the playoffs. I know you like hearing that, Dave, but
Well, I've just gotten beyond that. I don't think that's ever going to happen. So, I think there are about 15 schools, and Tennessee's one of them, that if the NCAA college football gods, whoever they may be, could make relevant, I think Tennessee is one of them. I think you include Alabama, go west, Southern California, Texas, Georgia. Yeah, I mean, it would be interesting to come up with that list of schools that you would want to be good. Ohio State, Michigan would be in that list. I know that we kind of rip on the Big Ten from time to time, but Amanda, there are that group of schools that when they're all good, you not only get the fans that are going to be there if you play UT Martin, but you're going to get a national response. And I think that's what we've seen out of Tennessee so far this season is a national response. You don't just have to be a Tennessee or an SEC fan to enjoy the story behind this team and the fact that there's just a big difference, Amanda, when Tennessee rises up or Alabama rises up when they were irrelevant's not the right word, but when they had Mike Shula as a head coach, and then when they rose up, there's a difference between doing it at those type of schools as opposed to a Baylor or Cincinnati. No offense to those schools, but there's just a difference in the impact you have on the overall sport.
I mean, yeah, the Baylors and the Cincinnatis and, even the Washingtons of college football, they're not as, I mean, their offense might be fun to watch, but it's hard to tune in when you have a fan base of literally 50,000 people. It's different. Tennessee has a huge fan base, a huge following. And also, I know I hate those stupid SEC teams, SEC commercials that say it just means more. I mean, but really in the South, it does. It does just mean more. And there are teams that you want to be good because you love to hate them. Some people love to hate Tennessee. Not quite like Tennessee baseball, because I think everybody besides Tennessee fans hated Tennessee baseball just because they seemed cocky and arrogant and in your face. But it was good for the sport. It was good for baseball. You hate Ohio State. Everyone hates Ohio State unless they like Ohio State. But if you don't love Ohio State, you hate Ohio State. But it's still good for the sport. You want them to be good. So with the rivalries the way that it is in the SEC, even if you don't like Tennessee, you still want Tennessee to be good because it's a rivalry and it means more whenever you face each other.
It's kind of a big downer. Let's be honest, Caleb. When Alabama is going through their stuff, or now to some extent when Florida's going through their stuff, I don't know that they're in that top 15 that I mentioned. They're right at it. But when Tennessee has gone through their stuff, and it's kind of a downer for those premier programs to just be horrible. I mean, if you're a college football fan, I know that Tennessee fans are probably saying, I'd like for Alabama to win 2 games a year for the next 50 years. And I get that. But still, as a college football fan, it kind of stinks when the premier programs are down, and Tennessee's one of those.
Yeah, and you're never going to have all 15 rolling at the same time that we
right.
named. There's always going to be some down and some up. I do think that's where, I mean, I'm going to be honest. I'm going to separate the top 15. I think then there's a top 5, and I think college football has suffered because Tennessee's in that top 5. I don't think Tennessee's a top 5 most successful program of all time. I got them in the 6 to 10 range. But I think their fan base is top 3. I think if you were to name 3 schools where you would want them, I'm sorry, I go knee deep on Vol Twitter, guys, and Vol Twitter is way more brutal than any other team or community's social media. You don't want to get on the wrong side of Vol Twitter. They will destroy you. And
So let me go back to what you said. You think they're one of the top 5 schools that college football wants to be good?
I say top 3. I mean, I would really push maybe number 1. I don't know if there's I don't know if there's a more. All schools have passionate fans. I'm not, they all have passionate fans. I don't know if it runs. I got enough evidence and data to show that, particularly on the online scene, and particularly with fan engagement. I mean, yeah, it's hard for me to find a greater one than Tennessee, quite honestly. And you have to remember, Tennessee has as a state, a uniquely big market for a college football program.
That's
I mean,
true.
you got 2 cities in the state of Memphis and Nashville. Memphis is it's all SEC in Memphis. There's not one SEC team that dominates the whole SEC, has a fan base in Memphis, but Nashville, I'd say Nashville's just straight up Tennessee country, like through and through. And that's a top 40 market in the country.
Yeah, and Amanda, they're also not superseded by an NFL team, an NBA team, so Caleb's right. Their market is bigger than most. They're very similar to Columbus, I think, at Ohio State, in that it's a pretty good sized market as far as a television radio market. They're in I think Tennessee, Knoxville is around the 50 to 60 range, and Columbus, I think, is a little bit bigger. But you also don't have a professional team to compete with. So it's an interesting point that Caleb brings up.
I mean, you have the Titans, but not. But the Titans are they're so new, and they're not the Kansas City Chiefs. They're not, the New England Patriots when Tom Brady was there. They're not dominant. People are going to flock to the most dominant team in the state. And right now that's clearly, the Vols. But the Vols were here before the Titans were here. Titans are again fairly new. Predators, fairly new. The Vols have been here clearly since 1869 or something like that. I can't remember when they were established. But Tennessee's been here for a long time. Vanderbilt, there's no competition with Vanderbilt. Not in football, very rarely have they been good in basketball. And baseball is really their sport. Memphis, there's no real competition there either. So, they have Tennessee's pretty, long. They have a pretty big area that they cover.
I would say, too, that it's not just limited by the state's borders. I think there are a lot of Tennessee fans in the Carolina area, the North Carolina area in Asheville, which I didn't know until I started covering Jonathan Crompton's recruitment. But that is Tennessee territory. I mean, big time. I mean, they're not rooting for the Tar Heels in football. They couldn't care less.
Because they're not good, or they haven't been good. They've never been good, except for, they're decent now, but they've never been a powerhouse. Tennessee has. So it's easier to root for somebody that's won it versus somebody that's never going to get there.
Yeah. So we had Hendon Hooker sign a deal with Mercedes of Knoxville, Caleb. And again, going back to your point, when we talk about television markets, Knoxville is a significant one. And Tennessee's usually almost always going to dominate there, with the exception of Jeremy Pruitt being there. They're going to do well in Nashville, but they also do really well in Atlanta. There are a lot of business people there that move to Atlanta, and they control some NIL dollars. So in terms of the TV market, when we start to look at that and break it down, I think that's a factor as well. But yeah, I think Tennessee's big in Atlanta. I think they're big in that North Carolina area. South Carolina split between Clemson and South Carolina, obviously. But I think Southern Kentucky. I think there are a lot of Kentucky fans who are Kentucky basketball fans and Alabama football fans. I'm sorry, Tennessee football fans. So yeah, that threw you off. So I think there are a lot of those as well, Caleb. So when it comes to fan support, maybe you're right. I mean, maybe it is top 5. I hadn't thought of it like that, but who would you have in your top 5 as far as if the NCAA could say you're good forever, at least relevant, at least competing for championships? Who would be your top 5?
I mean, I'm a top 3: Tennessee, Texas, Ohio State. Like, and Notre Dame, top 4. Tennessee, Texas, Ohio State, Notre Dame. Notre Dame just is such a national brand that, like, yeah, no, and maybe throw in Michigan or something like that. But yeah, Tennessee, Texas, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Michigan. That's my top 5.
It's intriguing. Your thoughts, Amanda?
So top 5, I would say I would go with Texas. I would go with Michigan. I would go with Alabama. I don't see how you leave them out.
You're right.
I would go
I meant
US.
I forgot.
I would go USC, and I would actually probably go either Florida State or Miami.
Interesting.
I would just, I mean, Tennessee, don't get me wrong, I'm not mad about it. But as far as like dynasty kind of, who has been relevant and all of that stuff, then that's who I would go with.
Miami, a younger. You all right there, Caleb?
Yeah.
Miami, a younger set. So is Florida State. I guess if I had to pick just off the top of my head, I would say Notre Dame. I would say Alabama. I would say Texas. I would say Southern Cal. Coin flip it at Michigan, Ohio State. I'd probably go Ohio State, and then maybe it is Tennessee. Yeah, I was thinking more along the lines of a top 15, but if you want to talk about a top 5, maybe. Maybe that's interesting. All right, so coming up on the program, we'll visit with Jonathan Crompton and Caleb. I want to get your score prediction. Who do you have in the game? And I know you're good with the gambling, so better than me. So what about the spread and all that good stuff?
Amanda has brought me over to her side on this. I did a deep dive on Tennessee this week, and I think Tennessee wins for a couple of reasons. I think that Alabama, and we had a chatter post this on the side, on the message board. Alabama is only 2 spots behind Georgia in terms of pass defense yards given up per attempt. They'd be ahead of Georgia if it wasn't for that Tennessee game. So this idea that Georgia has a better secondary than Alabama, I'm not seeing. I don't think playing on the road is going to impact Tennessee, and I wrote about this last night, because I think the tempo Tennessee runs doesn't require as much communication at the line of scrimmage. And also, we've heard some people say that Sanford Stadium is not that loud. And so
it's really not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear it's not.
And then so
I will tell you this. I will tell you that the loudest stadiums are and I was going to write something about this. Vols Time said Eric Ainge says the atmosphere at Georgia is overrated. Well, overrated pulls somebody else's opinion into it, but I think he and I are probably on the same page in that I don't think it's that intimidating. It's got the open end. It doesn't get that loud. If I started a list of most intimidating places to play, it would be some of these will surprise you, some won't. LSU, Florida, I think are right up there. I think Neyland is that now again. I think that I think Auburn is incredibly underrated. I think that place is really, really loud. And those would probably be my top 4. Now, I have not been to Texas A&M, which probably deserves consideration. That's one of the schools I haven't been to, and I haven't been to Missouri, which doesn't deserve consideration. And we'll see what Texas and Oklahoma bring to the table. But I don't think that Georgia's that difficult a place to play in.
No,
I don't think so either. I mean, they have to hold up signs to, when I went there, they were holding up signs in the student section to get their point across. Whenever you have to, like, if you have to bring in signs to the game to hold those up to get your point across, then I don't think you're very loud.
So the only real factor is Tennessee beat Alabama because of a lot of penalties. Georgia does not commit as many penalties as Tennessee, and also Tennessee doesn't have the home field advantage to create those penalties. But I think there's also the other side is Tennessee is the best defensive line Georgia has faced since Missouri. Yes, I said it. Missouri, for all their faults, has a very good line, and they darn near beat Georgia. And so
they should have beat Georgia.
Yeah.
The other thing to keep in mind is Tennessee's offense is so fast that teams don't have a chance to get riled up for second long or third and long. They're moving so fast. As long as they stay ahead of the chains, which they usually do because of the running game, you don't have the opposing crowd doesn't have that opportunity. So you give me 2 minutes, I give you Jonathan Crompton right after this off the Hook Sports.